The Battle of Waterloo. How Napoleon was finally defeated. On the morning of June 18th, 1815, the fate of Europe rested on a muddy battlefield in Belgium. The once great Napoleon Bonaparte, who had dominated Europe for over a decade, was about to fight his final battle. His French army stood against the combined forces of the Duke of Wellington's British-led coalition and Prussian forces under Field Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. By the end of the day, Napoleon's dream of reclaiming his empire would be crushed forever. Background: the return of the emperor. After his defeat in 1814, Napoleon had been exiled to the island of Elba, but his ambition remained undiminished. In March 1815, he escaped, landed in France, and rallied his old soldiers to his cause. His return, known as the 100 Days, sent shockwaves through Europe. The major powers, Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, quickly declared war on Napoleon. Knowing that his enemies would soon unite against him, Napoleon decided to strike first. His plan was to defeat the British and Prussian armies separately before their allies arrived. He marched north into Belgium, where the British and Prussian armies were stationed. His first victories came at Ligny against the Prussians and Quatre Bras against the British Allied forces on June 16, 1815. But these victories were not decisive. The Prussian army, though beaten, was not destroyed, and that would prove fatal for Napoleon. The battle begins. Napoleon versus Wellington. On the morning of June 18th, Napoleon's 74,000-strong army faced Wellington's 68,000 soldiers near the small village of Waterloo. The battlefield was wet and muddy due to heavy rains from the night before. Napoleon decided to delay his attack until midday, hoping the ground would dry and his artillery would be more effective. This delay gave the Prussians more time to regroup and march toward the battlefield. At around 11:30 a.m., Napoleon ordered his cannons to open fire. The first major attack was on the Hougoumont farmhouse, a heavily defended British outpost on Wellington's right flank. French soldiers fought fiercely, but failed to break through. The battle then intensified in the center, where Napoleon ordered a massive infantry assault on Wellington's lines. British and Allied troops, positioned on a ridge, held firm despite the overwhelming French attacks. The French cavalry charge. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Napoleon's cavalry commander, Marshal Ney, decided to launch a massive cavalry charge. Thousands of French horsemen rushed forward, hoping to break the British lines. However, Wellington's men had formed infantry squares, an effective defense against cavalry. The French cavalry charged again and again, but the British squares stood unbroken. Napoleon had wasted a huge part of his army in a failed attack. The Prussians arrive, the turning point. By late afternoon, the Prussian army under Blücher began to arrive on Napoleon's right flank. His worst fear had come true. The Prussians had recovered from their earlier defeat and were now reinforcing Wellington. Napoleon desperately sent his best troops, the Imperial Guard, to break Wellington's center before the Prussians could fully engage. At around 7:30 p.m., the Imperial Guard charged uphill toward Wellington's lines. These were Napoleon's most elite soldiers, veterans of countless victories, but this time they failed. British and Allied troops stood their ground and fired devastating volleys. The Imperial Guard wavered and retreated, something they had never done before. Seeing this, the rest of Napoleon's army panicked and fled. The final defeat and Napoleon's fall. As the French army collapsed, Wellington ordered a general advance. The Prussians pursued the fleeing French soldiers, turning the retreat into a rout. Napoleon, realizing he had lost, fled the battlefield. His dream of restoring his empire was over. A few days later, Napoleon abdicated for the second time and surrendered to the British. This time, he was sent far away to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would spend the rest of his life in exile. Legacy of Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo ended Napoleon's rule and reshaped Europe. The Congress of Vienna restored monarchies and redrew the map of Europe. Britain and Prussia emerged as dominant powers, while France was weakened for decades. Napoleon's defeat marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars and ushered in a period of relative peace in Europe. Though defeated, Napoleon's legacy lived on. His military strategies are still studied today, and his impact on law, governance, and nationalism remains significant. But on that fateful day in 1815, his empire met its end on the fields of Waterloo.